So I hope the start of your year has been positive so far. Obviously, you're a few days in. Welcome to Upper Six. You should all know me by now, so I won't introduce myself. And hopefully, I think most of you have also found your way to my office. So for anyone who doesn't know, I'm next to Mr. James, near private study in the Sixth Form Centre. So today we're going to talk about the UCAS landscape, what has been happening in terms of university admissions, what last year's or 24 leavers went on to do, in case that's of interest, and what that might mean in terms of you and your considerations. Mr. James is going to talk about predicted grades, because you'll get those shortly, and we'll talk about some general application advice. Now, before we start on all of that, it's not to say that all of you will apply to UK universities, and all of you may not be considering universities at all, and that's absolutely fine. You are not on a university conveyor belt. You don't have to apply. It's helpful if you let me know if you're not applying, so I won't chase you. And it's also helpful if your tutor knows as well. So there are lots and lots of options beyond school. There's school leaver programs, you can go straight to work. You might just want to do some traveling, have a gap year while you think about whatever it is you want to do next and whether or not that includes university. So although today we're talking about mainly university study, because based on your previous intentions, that's what the vast majority of you are looking to do. But it's not to say that that's the only option, or that's what you should be doing, or doing anything other than university is wrong, because that's not true. There are lots and lots of good options out there. University is one of them, and because the vast majority of you have said that's what you want to go on and do, we're going to speak to all of you. So, what happened UCAS 2024? There's a lot of applications. Almost 3 million applications were submitted. That's the second highest number of applications ever, only second to 2022. UCAS generally expect an average increase of 2 to 3% year on year. That's not changing. That expectation is currently in place until at least 2030. So it's not going to necessarily help if you think, oh, if I wait a year or two, it will be less competitive. That's not the case. It's likely only to get increasingly competitive. But at the same time, we've seen some really, really positive trends this year. So more universities are using clearing, and more high tariff universities and universities that traditionally have been popular at Abingdon have started using clearing. So for example, this last results day, for the first time, we saw universities like Durham, Manchester and Liverpool put courses in clearing. We also have a few students, we normally get a few a year, because there's not normally many places, but who get places at Durham, UCL, and those types of universities during clearing. There's been a real increase, particularly in STEM applications, and specifically engineering, technology courses, math science courses, and computer science. That's been where the biggest increase in applications has been, and that's been about 10% from the previous year, and that was obviously up from the year before that, and so on. Now, they don't tend to be overly popular for Abingdon students, but there's some courses where there's been a real decrease in applications, and it's mainly nursing and teaching. So if any of you are interested in nursing and teaching, it can be a really good time to apply because it's not as competitive as it has been previously. Now, there's some factors in that, and obviously we've talked through a lot of those before, so I won't go in a huge amount of detail. But obviously, there's population factors. There's more 18-year-olds in the population. A higher percentage of those are applying to universities. And although previously the thought was international demand would decline, that hasn't been happening. It has really continued. Now, this is the first time in a few years that I haven't said or haven't had to talk about the COVID effect. So really good news. It seems like university admissions is starting to recover, and I'm not seeing that same COVID effect where we had a bump for a few years and then offers were really struggling. So we have seen increasing offer rates, and that's really, really positive for you all. We've also seen that high tariff universities, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute, but that's where the majority of Abingdon students have tended to apply, and where you indicated your interest. The majority of the universities you've listed are almost all high tariff universities. Their offer rate has seen the highest increase, so really, really good news. And it's gone up 3%, which is actually quite a lot when we're talking about 3 million applications. And just so you know, the offer rate for last year's leavers was 77%. So Abingdon students do really, really well, and you're all in a really strong position to be applying to university. So this is what applications looked like across all the different providers. Now they are categorised in this graph based on higher tariff, lower tariff and medium tariff. Again, the majority of the universities you've so far mentioned have almost all been high tariff. And just so you know, that's generally ABB and above. So universities, on average, that are high tariff, it's where they're asking for ABB and above. To contrast that, medium tariff would generally be between BCC and BBB, and obviously low tariff, lower than that. The thing that's important to know is that 44% of all applications, so over 1.2 million applications, were just to the high tariff providers. And again, you should have already started looking at universities and what grades they're requiring, and chances are you're looking at ones that are asking for ABB and above. So it's important to know lots of other students are also looking at those universities. I thought it would be helpful to quickly just pause on A-level trends. Now, A-level results are normalising post-COVID, as you can see. So you can sort of see the dip where we had to do teacher-assessed grades and centre-assessed grades, and then how we've gone back down. And you might be able to tell right at the end where there is a bit of an increase, particularly around A stars and A's. So more students are applying with top grades. Now, I'm going to share with you what last year's leavers have gone on to do. This is not to say these are the universities you should be interested in or these are the ones you should be researching, but it's more to give you an idea of what other students saw when they went through the UCAS process, and to start thinking about, this is not too far different from years before, so it's likely to be a similar profile for you all. So 82% of last year's leavers were allocated their firm choice. That's in comparison to a 76% national average. 80% of those is Russell Group, which I know a lot of you are interested in and ask about. But I think more importantly, 92% went on to high tariff universities. Again, those that ask for ABB, and that's where the majority of the competition is. Now, we've actually seen a decrease in the number of upper six students based on last year's leavers who were looking for deferred entry, so those who wanted to take a gap year. I also saw less OAs who reapplied in 24. Now again, that's good news for you all because it likely means a little bit less competition. In the past, for the last few years, because of that COVID effect, we've seen students who already had their grades reapplying. Now obviously applying with achieved grades is inherently a stronger application because you're proven, your ability's proven and your academic skill set's proven. So it can make it slightly harder for those who are applying with predicted grades. So you're in a really good position because there's less of that happening last year, and likely, based on what last year's upper six indicated to me over the last few months, that will be reapplying this year. Now I want to highlight over there on the offers, you get 5 choices when you apply to UK universities. You should not expect to get all 5 offers. Only about a third received all 5 of their offers. And remember, that also includes OA, so those applying with achieved grades. About 2/3 achieved 4 offers. So when you're making your 5 choices, it's really important to have that range because what you're trying to do is you're trying to ensure you get at least 3 offers. So then that way, come sort of Easter time, April, May, you can then start making who's your firm, who's your insurance, when you get to narrow it down to 2, based on your academic progress over the next few months. That way, if you pitched yourself a bit high, you've got somewhere to go. Or potentially, if you pitched yourself a little bit low, again, you've still got options. So it's about having that range. And again, we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. So for last year's leavers, The most popular destinations were Exeter, Durham and Bristol. And the most applications to and offers from were Exeter, Bath and Bristol. This is also the first time that line's ever been the same, which is a really, really good sign. And again, that offer rate starting to recover and more offers being received. And then you can sort of see roughly the kind of top 10 destinations that students went on to. Really impressive group of universities, and also a good amount of range. And when we talk about that kind of high tariff, that's where you start to see the kind of Bath and the Loughborough that are really well-regarded universities. They just don't happen to sit in the Russell Group. So this is the first time I have shared with students this detail. And when we talk about choosing a good range of universities, I'm not just talking about grade entry requirements. I'm also talking about popularity. So what I've done is, based on the last few years, I've looked at universities that are the most selective, those that are popular, have high entry grade requirements, and where the offer rates are a bit lower. And then there's a list of those, and then you can then compare that with those that I've sort of roughly classed as very selective. So again, they might be a little bit less popular, or their entry grades are just a little bit lower than those most selective ones. And then as we go down. Now, there's an asterisk by Edinburgh, and Edinburgh is one that I like to call attention to, because generally Edinburgh asks for grades that are a little bit lower, that doesn't necessarily reflect their popularity. So for example, a lot of Edinburgh courses are at ABB, AAB, but they're highly selective. So you need to be, if you want to apply to a university like Edinburgh, you need to be exceeding their entry requirements before you then have a reasonable shot at getting an offer. And that's true for all of those most selective universities, and not untrue for those that are very selective as well. And what you're looking for is, ideally, you're not choosing more than 2 universities in any one category. So that way, you're giving yourself that spread and increasing your likelihood of getting multiple offers, and ideally 3 or more. And just a quick note, I have included on there some medium tariff universities. And just to remind you that many of these universities I've listed on here, they are actually outperforming some of the traditional Russell Group universities that are actually more selective, and they tend to be more selective because they're more popular, they get more applications, only because they're Russell Group. And it's not an indication that it's a better university or have better teaching. It's just not the case. So don't discount those universities just because they're not Russell Group. So how important are UCAS points? I get this question a lot. If you're applying to high tariff universities, and again, ABB or above, universities generally are not interested in your UCAS points. You get UCAS points obviously from your A-levels, from doing EPQ, from doing things like music exams, dance grading, theatre grading, etc. Fundamentally, high tariff universities, you have to meet the grade entry requirements. And they often don't accept the aggregate. So for example, in terms of UCAS points, A star AB is the same as AAA, but a university who asks for AAA may not take you even if you achieve in your final exams A star AB. And the same is true that AAC is not equivalent to ABB. If your offer conditions ask that you get ABB, if you get a C in one of your subjects, you are unlikely to get your place, even if you have A's and A stars in your other 2 subjects. Now, in contrast, the same is not true for mid-tariff universities. They generally accept UCAS points, and they generally accept the aggregate. So a university that asks for ABB or 128 UCAS points, they will accept you if you get AAC or A star AB, A star BC. So that's really important to know, and again, to think about that detail and where you're most likely to end up once you get your predicted grades. If you're predicted a C in any subject, think carefully about what your range looks like. So how do you know? Obviously, I've categorized those universities based on my experience, but how do you know when you're looking at them? Well, UCAS now provide that data for you. So the little box is a screenshot from using the UCAS course search, and this example is from Manchester, looking at geography, which requires AAB. Now in this example, you can see that 19 out of 20 applicants are successful for this course. You can see that the most common grade of students who enroll is AAB, which is great, that's their entry requirements. The highest grade that students join with is 2 A stars and an A, and the lowest grade is ABB. And they do take out the top and the bottom percentage for all of those. You can enter your own grades to see how you compare. So in this example, I've entered A star AA, and they say 100% of students with those grades have previously been accepted. Now, again, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think Manchester is probably selective, but it does depend on which course you're interested in. So if we compare that with computer science, again, it's at Manchester. Computer science at Manchester, you need 3 A stars. And again, there you can see how many students were successful out of 20 applications, the most commonly achieved grade by those students, and those aren't predicted grades in the top circle, those are achieved grades. Those who enrolled, what did they actually achieve in their final exams? And then you can, again, compare based on grades you enter, how many students with those grades were successful. So in this example, achieving A star AA, only 56% of those were successful in achieving a place. Let's look at a couple of other examples, because they're not all the same. So for example, and I'm not trying to give you, I'm not trying to call out any universities for good or bad practice, but business at Exeter, they ask for AAB. What UCAS are actually showing is, historically, they've accepted students at BBB. So if you're interested in business, and maybe you're predicted 3Bs or ABB, Exeter, who, based on their advertised entry requirements, might look really competitive, but this is actually suggesting they're a little bit less competitive than they want you to think. And so for this, we can see that the most commonly accepted grade is BBB. 9 out of 10 applicants were successful in getting an offer. Obviously, the highest grades, A star AA, the lowest grades, BCC. Now, some universities have really strong contextual offer programs. So sometimes if the grades look a bit low, it may be that they have a really, they might be making a real determined effort for that course in terms of contextual offers. But what you can see is by entering, if you achieve BBB, students with those grades, 75% of them were successful. Now, it also works the other way. So for example, history at Durham, they ask for A star AA. The most commonly achieved grade for students who enrolled on the history course was 3 A stars. So that's indicating that if you're applying with A star AA, you're first, a bit less likely to get an offer. And second, if you achieve anything less than whatever's in your grade offer conditions, you are highly unlikely to get a place. So then that's when it's then looking at, maybe it's one of your more aspirational choices, even if you meet or potentially exceed those offer conditions. So UCAS support. I'm going to try something new this year, and from next week you'll be able to book a one-to-one with either myself or Mr. Popplewell. We will look at your personal statement with you. We will look at your application. Now, these open from next week. The first set of those, really we're looking for students who are ready to apply in the next 6 weeks. So mainly those applying for Oxbridge or medicine. When you book that appointment, and there will be more sessions held later in October and November, but when you book that session, I'm expecting you to have basically filled in your entire UCAS application, including uploading your in your eyes, final personal statement. We will then look at those together. I will feed back on your personal statement. I will highlight the changes you need to make on your application, so that way, when we send it off to UCAS and universities, it should be as accurate as possible. Now, we check every UCAS application that's submitted on time. And I know Mr. James is going to spend a bit more time on this, but the first deadline for Oxbridge and medicine students is the 23rd of September. You don't have long. And by that deadline is when you need to hit submit in your UCAS track. That's the only time we're going to check it. That's not the deadline for you to email me your personal statement. That's the time when you have filled in your entire application, uploaded again in your eyes your final personal statement, and then we will check it through. Again, if you're not looking to apply to university in the next 6 weeks, don't book one of those appointments. Not yet. Wait till October, November. If you have some questions, do stop in and see me, or you can email me and we can set up a separate time. Also, be working with your tutor. At this point in time, anyone who's looking to apply for university this year, really, you should be developing your draft personal statement. Obviously, if you're one of those early deadline candidates, you should be looking at coming towards your final draft. So it should be now with your tutor and a subject teacher. At this, I'm going to hand over to Mr. James to talk a bit about predicted grades. Again, if you've got any questions, do send me an email or come see me. Thank you.
Right, before I just get into this, so I'm going to just kind of run you through how predicted grades work, and then some just advice about making your application and so on. Just before that, just to confirm, you've got your core sport straight after this, and look, I was really impressed with the productivity this morning around beach court. Not so much, I guess, yesterday, day before. Just keep yourselves honest in terms of, are you just kind of hiding away there, not really working? You've got some work in front of you, but you're kind of having a chat. We haven't got kind of time to be working at those low levels of efficiency. And it's just not a good look, particularly in light of what I'm about to talk about. So I want to just talk about the national picture and the kind of traditional kind of position with UCAS predictions. Nationally, and I dare say this is true, historically at Abingdon as well, UCAS predictions are generous. Okay, you can see in blue there the achieved in orange, the achieved grades, exam grades, where blue was pitched. A few years ago, year on year, the stats would look similar. Or on the right, where on average, the UCAS predictions kind of came out. On average, the predictions are 1 or 2 grades more generous than the achieved outcome, which isn't to say there aren't some people nationally who exceed their predictions. We don't have a crystal ball. We're just doing our best at this point based on all evidence. But, typically UCAS predicted grades are on the generous side. So we and your heads of department are working to the definition that you've heard before, that predicted grades are an honest but positive assessment of your potential at A-level. Honest but positive. So what you're going to receive on the 17th is, on average, for the cohort, going to be on the optimistic side, yeah? So I very strongly urge you to not push the envelope further. So I've sent you the policy. Do read it. And there's a section there about appeals, and that's maybe what you'll be quite interested in, but I'm saying be very, very, very cautious about that. You've heard, particularly for the very high tariff universities, if you miss the offer, you are really unlikely to be accepted. And then you wind up high and dry on results day, as we've seen with some pupils every single year. In particular, I would caution you in the strongest possible terms against trying to raise your grades in more than one subject or by more than one grade in a given subject. Okay, that has historically led to people putting themselves in a very bad position indeed. Okay. So, for instance, 2 years ago, just picking some stats that apply, to Abingdonians, everybody who found themselves without a place in 2023, when we were there on results day, every single one of them had inflated a grade, at least, and 75% of those guys had inflated by 2 or more grades. Just don't do it. It's not in your interests. Those original predicted grades, they are trying to err on that side of optimism and positivity. If you think there's been a clerical error, absolutely flag that up. Absolutely. So, how is this formulated? How does this work? What can you expect? Timeframes. So, you've had your guidance grades, and they were maybe more of a kind of straight bat kind of prediction of your likely achievement at A-level based on, a lot of data and experience of colleagues who've been doing this for a great many years. So you can expect, clearly, the predicted grades to resemble the guidance grades, right? That makes sense, but they will take into account the additional evidence that you might have been able to present since you sat the summer exams, notably September resits in many cases, many subjects, but other subjects are wanting different types of evidence, okay? And they might have seen other things. You might have put some work in front of your teacher, okay? Your UCAS prediction is going to be a single grade, right? And yeah, I wouldn't expect them to be lower than your guidance grades, unless some additional information has come to light in the meantime. So, heads of department, teachers are working hard. For instance, marking those September resits, that can take quite a long time in some subjects. And they're working then to put together the UCAS predicted grades over the next week or so. And then there's a piece of work that's needed to kind of collate that and so on. So you're going to get your predicted grades on Tuesday, the 17th of September, which gives you guys, particularly Oxbridge, a bit of time, before your deadline anyway. Your EPQ predictions will follow a little bit later for reasons that the evidence base isn't quite there yet, and we want a strong evidence base for that. So you will see in the predicted grades policy that you do have a right to review, right to appeal. I am saying to you that you need to think very, very carefully about doing that, and I would put you off doing that in more than one subject or by attempting to do a 2-grade inflation. So do flag any clerical errors. Heads of department sort of oversee this. They're the gatekeepers, and they will consider each and every case, on its own merits. But they're only going to do that at several points, 2 or 3 review points that they will set out with you, because it's not fair. I'm looking up there, Mr. Frampton. It's not fair to our heads of department that they're continually bombarded with these requests. And you need time to accumulate more evidence. So they will set out to you when they are willing to look at reviews. And that's going to fit, obviously, with different subjects, having different data points, tests, big essays, whatever it might be, that's going to inform that decision-making. So you can expect that if you do a review, you ask for a review outside of that window to just be turned down. You need to be presenting a strong evidence-based case for such a change, not just saying, I want, or rather you're going to say, I need these grades to to apply for Durham, whatever it might be. What you mean is, I would like that. But we need to have integrity about it, and we need to do the best by you, which is not to give you hyperinflated grades that you can't achieve. That is doing nobody any service whatsoever, okay? I would ask you please to look at the policy that I've sent to you, please. Yeah. So, making this work for you. I think this is the most important thing that I'm going to say, really. You should, as you've heard, be thinking about a range of courses. And you need to please start with the subject, the course that you want to study, that you're going to be passionate about. This has been our mantra all the way through. We very strongly believe that you're going to get the best outcomes if you choose, I really am interested in biochemistry, or whatever it might be, rather than, I want to get into Exeter, what can I study that might get me in there? That's the wrong way of thinking. Okay? Do your research and include that range of entry requirements. So we've had one way of thinking about how you might kind of categorize those three sections. Maybe you're aspirational, maybe you're secure and safe, based on the sort of categories of university you had before. But I'm going to give you a second way of thinking about it, which is around your grades. So A, your predicted grades, and B, your guidance grades. Okay? When I am talking about predicted grades, I am talking about the original predicted grades that you're going to be issued on Tuesday the 17th, which have not been adulterated by you going to negotiate with the head of department. Okay? So, you should have 2 or fewer in that top aspirational category, and that is going to be at or above those original predicted grades. Fine, crack on, go for it, be ambitious, but make it work for you and have those safer and securer choices in there as well, supporting you. So I'd say have at least 2, in the midfield, as it were, in that secure band, which is probably just at those original predicted grades. Okay? And lastly, we want you, and it is right and it is sensible, to have a safer choice, which is at the guidance grades that you got, or at least 1 grade below your predicted grades, whichever is safer. We've got to remember that what you achieved last summer is the best indicator of what you're at, where you're at the moment. It's very easy to lose all sight of reality, and there's maybe a tiny bump in the guidance grades from the summer exams. There's a tiny bump again into the predicted grades. And then we project from there and we go and negotiate, and suddenly we're nowhere near where we're actually performing. And that has to remain in your thinking. Because if you secure an offer based on some inflated grades that you have no hope of achieving, you are going to end up in a real predicament and left high and dry on results day. So have this spread. Absolutely, be ambitious. Use those aspirational options. But be smart, do the right thing. Give yourself as many choices, as many entry levels as you possibly can. And just a reminder on that point, particularly Edinburgh in mind, but there's a few others that might fall into this category, that there might be some courses that look on paper like really decent, secure or safe options, based in principle on the offers they give, but you can find out that actually they are more selective than they appear, and therefore they don't make particularly good, safe or secure options. Dates for you and deadlines. You've had this. Oxbridge or medicine. Please can you complete Mr. Taylor's form for that today? I know a load of you have already done it. It's really important that you do that. We've got the information so that we can support you. You should also have already signed up for pre-interview assessments. I've said this probably 10 times to you. That is you to do that. Those are the deadlines to do that, but again, that's a today job if you haven't already done it. Deadlines, as Mrs. Hodnott has said, the 23rd of September for any Oxbridge or medics, and the 20th of November for everybody else. There's benefit if you're looking at 20th of November, but you're ready to go, to sort of earlier in November. even sort of maybe back end of October, sort of getting the ball rolling. And I'll talk to you a bit more about that in future weeks. Okay, so final message. Try and summarize everything I'm trying to get across to you. Holding unrealistic offers based on unrealistic predictions is not helpful and ultimately will not lead to success or happiness. Just don't do it. Part of the reason I will say that the outcomes were so good for last year's upper sixth is I think they listened to our advice a little bit better about inflating grades and things like that, and having a range. So please do listen to us. You've seen it leads to good outcomes, okay? Please do not lose sight of the fact that the A-level grades you actually achieve, they are the most important thing in giving you future choice, okay? And getting head up on predicted grades can distract from that. So just focus on your studies and things will take care of themselves. Choose subject first and then institution second. We've said that a lot. We firmly believe it. Okay. And lastly, make sure you do have that spread of entry requirements. Use the system. Make it work for you. Play the game. Give yourself as much choice as you can for as long as you can. And then at Easter time, you can be making really intelligent choices based on the most sort of up-to-date information you've got. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that's kind of informed you and you know what's what. We're here to help. Come talk to us if you've got any concerns. Lastly, please don't go talking to any heads of department about your predicted grades until you actually get them. Okay? Cool. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day.